Hi everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. A bitch is back talking about books. Happy New Year. It is a new year, and with that, I want to apologize because I know I haven't really been active on my YouTube channel as much. It's just because I've been working a lot with retail and restaurant jobs, which is restaurant, like I work in the food industry basically, like restaurant jobs. The holiday season is the season that you get the least amount of break. I'm so sorry. I've just been working a lot. I got bills to pay, and also on top of that, I've just really been in a reading slump. And it's really hard for me to make videos on books that I just have no feeling towards. It's either like it's mediocre. It's not something that I really hate, like for example, The Haunting Adeline, or really love. I just feel so neutral about these books that I can't possibly make videos on them because I just don't know what to say. But these books are just not making me feel anything, and I've just been in the biggest reading slump. So as you can tell from the title of this video, we are going to be talking about reading slumps, books to get you out of a reading slump. But we're going to talk about it, and hopefully I can help you out of it, especially this is a new year, right? Maybe people's goals, if they have New Year's resolutions, one of those goals could be reading a lot more. Mine is to get freaking back into reading. Hopefully the suggestions that I give, you haven't read them yet. So with the reading slump, I feel like there are certain points and certain types of books that I would avoid and certain books that I would promote. It doesn't have to be a book that's necessarily good. It doesn't have to be well written. It doesn't have to be like super amazing, interesting, invested, huge fan base, etc., etc. It just needs to be a book where it's so easy to get into. You could read it, no thoughts, head empty. It doesn't need poetic language. Like I would highly avoid something like Ocean Vuong, where he writes really poetically and you just need to analyze every single line. I highly suggest reading things that are just really easy to read. For example, contemporary romances. A lot of contemporary romances, for the most part, are easy to read. They're written in a way that is in the same language as us. You don't have to learn a whole new set of words that you might have to with fantasy series. So I would recommend authors like Tessa Bailey. I feel like she's pretty solid in writing average to good romance books that will just get you out of that slump. There's no world building necessary. There's no thoughts that you need to really think about as you're reading it. You're just learning about the connection between two people. I would avoid, even though this has a really big fan base, Sarah J Maas books because of all of the world building that you have to do. So any adult fantasy books, I would say avoid when you're trying to get out of a reading slump. Don't start Priority of the Orange Tree. Don't start the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. Don't start Throne of Glass series, even though for a lot of people I know, especially on Book Talk, the A Court of Thorns and Roses series and the Throne of Glass series are the series that actually got them back into reading after never reading for years. But I would just say to avoid those things because it takes too much brain power to really do all the world building. Contemporary romances, no adult fantasies, but what I will say is that I think young adult fantasy or young adult dystopian are really good places to get you out of a reading slump as well. In young adult books, the writing is a little bit more simpler, easier to read, especially dystopian. For example, Hunger Games, right? If you've ever read the Hunger Games, amazing books to read. It's still set in a similar world to ours. You don't have to learn all of this different language dictation, etc., but really interesting stories, really interesting characters. Dystopian, another one. Love It or Hate It, Shatter Me series. Literally no world building at all, just connection between characters. And the writing is so simple. It's going to get you out of a slump, especially if you're a character-driven reader. I also think that this series that I'm going to say next, the Unwind series by Neil Shusterman, is so underrated. It was really popular back in 2012. So underrated, but those books, I don't even remember what happened in it. I want to reread them. They're insane. They are page turners. They will get you out of it. They will get you out of that reading slump. 100%. Personally, I am biased towards Marissa Myers. I think that if you picked up any of her books, the way that she writes just flows so well. You get so invested in it. I would say Marissa Myers books, specifically the Lunar Chronicles, really, really good, really easy to read, and Heartless. I think that will also help you get out of reading slump. I would avoid the Renegade series because especially in the beginning, you're learning so much new information about the Renegades world. I would just kind of avoid it. There's way too many characters to start out. Just stick with Lunar Chronicles if you haven't read it, or Heartless. I think she's a pretty solid author in writing page turners. Another thing that I would also avoid with reading slumps is mystery books. I feel like mystery books, for the most part, are kind of slow burns. And you don't want to read a slow burn when you're in a reading slump. You don't. Because yes, it might be interesting to, be like, oh my God, what's going to happen? The mystery. But if you're not invested in that mystery, you're only getting little bits and clues throughout the whole thing in a manner that doesn't happen fast enough. I would just kind of stay away from that. Maybe a thriller. But personally, I haven't read a lot of thrillers. So I feel like that genre, if you just look up good thriller books, I feel like thriller books would probably get you out of reading slump because they're thrillers, right? You just want to keep going and reading it. Oh my God. Actually, the one thriller book I will say that I have read in 7th grade, it's a thick one though, but it's so good, is Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. That book is so good and it will get you out of that slump but I feel like if you want to read a thriller book, if that is your genre of choice, that's a good book to read. It's just really thick, and I would kind of avoid thick books as well when it comes to a slump. I know my headspace is going all over the place, but yeah, that is something that I will recommend. All in all, I just really think you need easy, not too big of a book, not a lot of world building, something to get you invested. Or another thing that you could do is read a book that you've already read before. I personally don't really like rereading books, but that's just a personal thing. If there's a story you already know and you know you like it, I feel like rereading a book will help get into the habit of, picking up that book and actually opening it. I feel like that's the hardest part when it comes to reading, starting, sitting down, opening that book, taking the time to read the words and fully sit and have that imagination start is the hardest part. So I definitely suggest that if all else fails. And then if that fails, the last thing I also would suggest reading a book that maybe you saw the movie or TV show of, because you already are really familiar with the story as well. And reading the book of a story you already know, similarly to rereading books, is going to give you even more insight to that TV show or that movie that you really, really liked, because books have more details in them. So maybe if you haven't read Harry Potter, you can start reading Harry Potter if you've watched all the movies and you love them. I would also suggest that for Outlander. I've never read the Outlander series, but I've seen the TV show. So I feel like if I'm really in a reading slump, I might want to start Outlander. Or another thing, right, people do is Bridgerton. They watch the Bridgerton TV show, they really, really love it, and they find out it's based off a book to go read those books. I think that that's a really good idea when you're in a reading slump because you already know you like the characters and the story. It's now adding to it. And when you're reading, you get way more detail, and all of the things that are in the book are basically canon. That's kind of a little short suggestions that I would say that will help get you out of a reading slump. Now, I just want to maybe list off books that personally helped me get me out of a slump and the ones that I would suggest that might be able to help you. Unwind series by Neil Shusterman, any book by Marissa Myers, The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang, The Bride Test by Helen Huang. Most Tessa Bailey books, specifically It Happened One Summer, is a really, really solid work from her. I would suggest opening up Wattpad, honestly. I think the Mindfuck series by S.T. Abbey is a really good choice. The Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. The Shatter Me series is another one. The Deal by Elle Kennedy, but I don't want to promote Elle Kennedy as an author, but that's another story. Colleen Hoover books, because you will always have very strong feelings in Colleen Hoover books, whether you love them or you hate them. It is always going to be a wild ride, even though she's kind of problematic, and that is a thing for another time. I would say The Hunger Games is a really good option, especially if you watched the movies. Normal People, especially if you watched the TV show. Those are just kind of some of my suggestions. Please let me know books that helped you get out of a reading slump. If you have those suggestions, put them down below in the comments. Please help me out. Get me out of this reading slump. I'm thinking of maybe rereading Twilight because I did want to do a review or like an analysis on Twilight. So maybe I'll do that, but I don't know. Happy New Year. Please let me know your thoughts below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.